So I'm going to address social construction and social constructionism, because in the more academic type of research field there is this, whole kind of tradition or whatever, about social construction, and so I want to give you an example, So let's say you are in Himalaya. Now I'm going to describe this in forms of words, and I mean you will place the sort of association to the word and sort of imagine something that you, in order for what you sort of are understanding Himalaya to mean, But so anyway, I'm going to continue. So imagine now that you are in Himalaya and you are visiting someone who is a Buddhist, and you're going to do a meditation, and in this meditation you are asked to sit down, and you are, picturing this meditation to sort of transfer you into some more like, peaceful state maybe, or you may be transcending into something, that is like a superlative or whatever form of vision of, your own understanding, or of your own sort of beingness or whatever. So what I would assume actually is that this Buddhist or whatever who is giving you this form of meditation wouldn't say, that okay, you are going to, see beyond this reality. Because if you are saying that, you basically are saying, you who are receiving that information already have a clear understanding, for what each of those words in that particular language carry for formal information, because it has been somehow integrated into your understanding through some form of socialization process. And this often is, if it's your mother tongue, language, it is through the, primary socialization process, that you have acquired this information, what these words carry for form of information, and what, what they mean, what are they referring to in this reality context. And also, most words have some form of value behind them, and this can even be shifting between different, languages, and also languages in certain contexts. Because, for example, English has been very much spread, and it is spoken in different contexts, and depending on the context, certain words are going to have almost a different kind of meaning or association to them, and they can even have a different form of pronunciation depending on where you might be, acquiring this, word through some form of communication chain, So I think a Buddhist wouldn't tell you to see beyond, because as soon as you hear those words and you are in a meditative state, what would happen is that you start to associate certain information that you have in your mind in relation to those words. So there is, quite a lot of, let's say, texts that has some form of religious connection, and depending on those texts, I mean, those are written in a form of language, and that each of those words carry information, and as you are sort of understanding that, you sort of are placing certain values and, combining together some form of image in relation to that. And one of the, things in this is that, where have you gotten that language from? Well, it is from this form of social construction that has been, enforced upon you through these forms of socialization processes. It is coming to you from the society around you, wherever you have been, been leading your life. So let's say even with religious texts themselves, you are already having a vision. As soon as I say religious text, you already are associating something in relation to that, and that is a form of social construction that is connected to that word and that specific language and words and so forth, and it has been accumulated and sort of fast forward and passed on through different generations, and it's now in your mind and it's built into your understanding of what you sort of is understanding the word to be, and the world, because you are perceiving the world through these concepts, So most religious texts, they often have some form of underlying message, or whatever. They try to invoke something in you to sort of perceive things from a different perspective that is not fully in relation to the physical form of material type of reality, and that might require you to use your own sort of mind, to sort of process that. And I mean, when you're thinking, you're using some form of language, and that language is going to sort of constrain you or restrict you in what you actually can think. So when you are meditating, there is this whole concept of going blank, to sort of allow your mind to be silent, because the language that you have acquired through some form of, as I said, socialization process is going to impact what you sort of is going to understand, how you're going to conceptualize it, and also how you're going to relate that mind vision into the reality of your everyday life. So there is other forms of languages, so for example, to dance, to have some form of movement can be a form of language. The sound, itself, I mean, this is how we are making up the languages. But actually the sound itself, when you sort of placing empathy on the sound, and not just the words here, but the sort of the frequency of the sound, you are also communicating something, but it's quite interesting, because for example, the Islamic Quran, Quran al-Karim, has not only words written in a language, but it is the sound recitation, that is giving some form of, something beyond what you actually are able to conceptualize, depending on if you understand Arabic or if you're reading the Quran in any form of other language, of course you're mostly going to focus on those words that you sort of are reading and conceptualize, and and understand what the information from that is sort of combining into, and you might be reading some underlying message if that is what you sort of is meant to be doing. But even if you would listen to the Quran, you would actually hear the recitation, which is a form of actually delivering something that is sort of stretching beyond the language of the spoken word itself, and also stretching beyond the social construction. So most people who reading stories, they're reading the stories, whatever, what they actually just is hearing is just something that is, conforming and sort of can be applied into their own social construction that they sort of compare that text to, They compare a text to the social construction that they have the understanding for the reality of. So it doesn't add on anything else than that, And also if there is a underlying message, that might be something else to sort of, you may get different associations or whatever, when you're reading something, you maybe get a feeling, and feelings are one of the things that animals also can feel. Like animals can feel, sad, they can feel pain, they can feel happy. So I mean, that is something that is very, very basic, So if you're just going to base everything, that you do or whatever that you sort of is sensing or thinking based on feelings, you basically just connecting to that form of animal type of way of going about. So what I sort of want to bring forth here is the social construction of the reality that we sort of have, and how can we sort of transcend that, you know? How can we transcend it? Because even now as I'm talking, you know, I'm sort of explaining this in words, you know, and even if these words and stuff has different forms of, you know, sounds as I'm sort of, you know, explaining this, we are not really having any, I mean, the sounds that I sort of is, you know, explaining this language and words in, and that you sort of processing into some form of meaning and information based on that. I mean, I'm not really trying to express anything else in the, you know, sort of sound, except this form of what should I say, like social types of, you know, there's these small nuanced forms of ways that you can sort of express things through. For example, you can express emotions through the sounds that you're making, the way you are speaking, you know. If you are angry, you might be shouting, and that will symbolize that, you know. If it is a form of social construction that other receiver of that message is having, that, oh, because actually one of the interesting things when you're going across cultures, you know, of course everyone has that basic set of emotions that they sort of can express, but when it comes to cultures and body language, there can be quite big differences, you know. Some people wouldn't even show if they are angry, you know. They would just like seal it, and because it's a form of the culture, you know, versus other cultures have some form of very expressive type of anger, you know. But I think one of the most like key points when it comes to these things, you know, to sort of transcend beyond these types of social constructions that we have, because, you know, we have these concepts about everything, you know, whether it's a form of physical object, you know, we think, you know, like I have a pen here, like as soon as you see this one, you're going to think, oh, that's a pen. But I mean, if you haven't been exposed to a pen before, if you're like a small child, you will think something else. You maybe think this is a, I don't know, some kind of toy, or I don't know, candy or something. I mean, it depends on it depends so much on the language and the social construction, what has been told to you that something is meaning. So how can you sort of transcend beyond that concept, you know? Because as I said, this do not only apply to physical concepts, it apply to the months. Like if you have a concept of it's the daytime, it's the nighttime. I mean, the way that you perceive these things are based on the social constructions that you have been given, and those things are placed upon you. It's a form of domination strategy as well, because as you are conforming to that, you know, notion of what things are meaning, you are adhering to something, you know, and it has been passed on to you, but you are not questioning, is this really a pen, you know? What is this really, you know? And one of the things that, you know, is very common when it comes to meditations and so forth is not to just, you know, a Buddhist, you know, who wants you to meditate wouldn't ask you to, you know, see beyond, because that carries certain information that is a form of social construction. They would simply ask you to sit in a formal position and just maybe, you know, just leave you alone for a few moments, maybe ask you to do something else, you know, like focus on your breath, because it has a calming effect on the mind's way of like on the way that the thoughts are moving, you know. And also you know, in science and when you're doing research, like the main point is, if you see a pen, it's not really a pen, because the pen concept is a form of social construction. This can be anything, you know. You are told that this is a pen, and that's what you are believing in, you know. So if I, for example, would have another type of language, I could maybe, you know, explain that this is a pen in a form of, you know, dance movement or something. And one of the things I think is sort of superior, you know, when it comes to the Quran al-Karim, you know, the Islamic type of religious text, is that it is a form of recitation. It's not just a recitation, because when you're actually pronouncing it, you know, it makes a form of frequency, you know, and that frequency is something it's not just something that is a form of language. It might be a language in some other context, you know, we don't know really, but there is a form of underlying type of frequency, you know, in that. And this is common even in some form of mantras that are used within, you know, certain religious traditions, you know. So you might be said to, you know, make certain sounds because it's a form of mantra, you know, and that sort of frequency in that mantra is carrying some form of transcending, you know, beyond the social construction that you are sort of taking in the reality from. So, and especially if you're going to do scientific research, you cannot just adhere to the concept that, okay, this is called share, and that's what it is. No, then if you believe in that, well, you are more stupid than than the share itself, because the share itself wouldn't even call itself a share, you know, because it doesn't adhere to some social construction concepts that we have placed on it, you know. So to know what something is, you sort of have to question it, and you have to, you know, transcend the social construction that you have on it. And this is, as I said, you can see this in different forms of cultures, because body language is different. And especially an interesting thing is the form of frequency, you know, because the brain operates on certain frequencies. You know, when you are sleeping, your neuroactivity in the brain has a certain type of frequency. When you are awake, you have another form of, you know, neuro type of frequency, you know. And all these types of frequency, it's, you know, it's a form of wave. It's the same thing as when you're making some form of sound, you know, that's also a frequency. Everything operates on a form of frequency. So think about these things, you know, how can you sort of take your awareness and like your consciousness beyond the social construction. I mean, within science you would have some methods to go about and do this. If you are within a religion, you would have to use some other form of methods. For example, as I said, sound and frequency, and you know, maybe meditations or something. But that's like you know, something to be aware of, you know, because you can make yourself really stupid if you are going to say that this is it, you know, because that is the most stupid thing you possibly could do, you know, like, because everything you're trying to describe with some word is going to be a social construction at the end. It's a form of text, you know, every word that you say adding up to a text. But beyond the text itself, I mean, if there is some form of frequency that is underlying it, as I said, for example, about the Quran, and also the underlying message in that text, those things are more like, you know, it sort of adds a form of further dimension to it, you know. But it is very, you know, the, you know, understandings of these things that makes the difference, you know. And yeah.